Welcome everyone for today's weekly web chat from Prairie Public. I'm Darcy Backegard, and today we're talking about something that I really need to work on. And we're going to talk about a live, very present example of the need that I have for continuing to work on growth mindset. So with me today to help talk about this are growth mindset trainer LaCosta Potter with the South East Educational Cooperative, and Courtney Nelson from Northern Cass, kindergarten teacher.
Pre-K.
And say that again?
Pre-K.
Oh, pre-K, even better. She is starting her kiddos from the ground floor with a growth mindset. This was not how we were going to start this chat, but we're going to start this chat a little differently than I intended. So LaCosta generously agreed to share her time today, and we agreed to meet at the Prairie Public offices, and she was just going to sit with me. And we agreed to that early in July. And then after that, I agreed to do a professional development today in Carrington. And I was like, ooh, I have a web chat at 2 o'clock, but I can just do that right from Carrington. And I'm so used to being in that room alone, doing the web chats and having people join virtually, that in my brain, that just all worked out. And then 10 minutes ago, I got an email from LaCosta saying, hey, I'm at your office looking for you. And because LaCosta is the generous growth mindset trainer that she is, she was like, I get it, we'll roll with it. So she's making it work. But while we were waiting for LaCosta to get on, I was sharing with Courtney. I was like, okay, I feel like this is a growth mindset opportunity because my screw up, my inability to do this correctly, I literally have a stomach ache right now. Like I feel sick in my stomach because I feel so bad that I screwed up. I was telling Courtney, I said, this is the kind of thing that now, like every time I see LaCosta, I'm probably going to bring up my mistake, right? So instead of forgiving myself, instead of growing from this, instead of letting it go and acknowledging that humans make mistakes, I will relive my uncomfortable stupidity like every time I see her. And I was like, so, okay, like how do we help our kiddos get over what I, as a full-grown, almost 40-year-old adult, am experiencing, that I tried something and I wasn't successful, and now I like have this horrible feeling.
I found that, like, for me as a teacher, if I'm going to preach this growth mindset and get it to these kids at such a young age, I have to fully embrace it and live it myself. So every time I make a mistake, I own up to it fully, right in front of them. Like, oh gosh, that was a mistake. And then they're right there with me like, that's okay, Mrs. Nelson. Mistakes help you grow. Mistakes make your brain stronger. It's just something that, I guess for me, it's easier because I'm right in front of them all the time and I can own up to that, and they own their mistakes. It's a two-way street. But they can tell when you don't own it, and it's not going to work. They will not embrace that growth mindset. They won't live it out in your classroom, in their work, in their lives at home. When they leave you and go to another classroom, they won't live that out if they're not seeing it truly from you. That's been one of the biggest things for me. Like, you have to really practice what you preach.
Okay. Are you there, LaCosta?
Yes, I am. And I was going to say, Darcy, you're way too hard on yourself because things just happen. And maybe I can make you feel better by saying I did something very similar last week. I was emailing 45 participants in Bismarck to remind them of a training I had coming up last Monday. And I was in my home with my 3 children running around, and I got a little bit distracted, and I emailed the wrong 45 participants that were actually in Minot. So these things happen, and I had to apologize to everybody when I got on site, and they just happen. We're juggling a lot of balls in August, and yeah.
We are, and we fall into our routines. So this was my question. The focus of today's chat is really to talk about nurturing growth mindset in our students, and that is where we're going to focus. But while we're talking about how we do this for our students, one of the things I just shared with Courtney was, this to me is a no-brainer. on doing with my students. I went to a conference, a STEAM conference last spring, and I went to a session that LaCosta led on growth mindset, and I was like, this is phenomenal. Like, this is the stuff. And so it was very easy for me to buy into why I would model this and why I would do this with my students. Now that I have this mindset in mind, I am more aware of the fact that I don't do it all the time in my own life. I allow myself to try things in some circumstances, but there are certain situations where I'm like, well, I'm just not good at that. And so I can't do that. Or like, my sister is better at that. And so like, she should just do that because I can't. And like I said, I'm a 40-year-old person that, yes, that needs to get over that. So I appreciate both of your feedback. So let's dive into some of those tips. LaCosta, can you just share, what is your explanation? Like, what is a growth mindset?
Absolutely. So obviously you got to consider the opposite as a fixed mindset, so that, you know, there's a continuum along there, anywhere from the fixed mindset being that I absolutely won't try it, not I know someone's better, but I will not try it because I know I'm going to fail, and you kind of set yourself up for that idea, to the opposite end of the spectrum, whereas I'm going to try just about anything, and if I fail, it's okay. I learned a way not to do it, if you will. And so exposing your kids to the idea of that continuum, and that you can be in any place on that continuum for different subjects. Perhaps you walk into a math classroom and you are very intimidated because you have failed at math at some time in your educational career. And so for math, you're sitting on the end of a fixed mindset. However, you are an extremely athletic child, or adult for that matter, and you know that when you are put in that realm of a physical education assessment or test or whatever that happens to look like, you are on the growth mindset because you can throw farther, run faster, and jump higher than anybody else you know. And so knowing that this continuum exists, I think, is first and foremost important for kids. But knowing that you move along this continuum throughout the course of your life, and a day's measurement, I think, Darcy, in the little workshop that you were referring to, we took a self-assessment as adults to figure out where we were on that continuum. And then we had a conversation that this is a moving thing. This is not a constant. It's always ebbing and flowing, if you will, sometimes depending on attitude on a particular day, but definitely attitude toward the context that you're in.
Do you find, either of you, that students who, I feel like sports, you brought up basketball and physical education is a good analogy. And a colleague of mine in Idaho recently shared a story where she was talking to this kid about picking out a free book. They had all these books for back to school night. And she was like, don't you want a book? And he goes, no, I hate reading. And she was like, why? And he said, well, it's just too hard. And she said, well, what do you like to do? And he said, play basketball. And she said, have you always been good at basketball? And he went, well, no. And she said, well, how did you get better at playing basketball? And she said at that point, the penny dropped, and the kid could see where she was going with this. And so he begrudgingly said, I practice. And she said, okay, so what happens in basketball when you practice? And he was like, I get better. She was like, okay, so how might you get better at your reading skill? So I think you hit it on the head, LaCosta, where kids will see, for some reason, when this kid was talking about basketball, it was obvious to him that it's a growth opportunity, right? If he practices, he gets better. That's obvious. It's basketball. That's how it works. And yet when it was reading, he was like, I'm not a good reader. Reading is hard. I'm not going to do it. I'm not good at it.
I think that's why, like, for me, it's so important to get them when they're so young, because there is such a shift. Like, you can be not so good at a sport, but it's okay because you can practice with the team and you can get better. But if math is really hard for you, then math stinks all the time and you don't think you can get better. One of my favorite things when we first start learning about a growth mindset is we talk about reading. I mean, I get them when they're learning letters and sounds and the most amazing part of reading. And we talk about how when I was younger, if I was not so good at reading, if letters were really hard for me and I never practiced and I never learned my letters, would I be able to read right now? And they're all like, that's just an easy way for them to be like, no, you wouldn't. You wouldn't be a teacher now. You wouldn't be able to do a lot of things if you couldn't do that. So I think for me, that's why it's so critical that for young kids and to keep it going, that they have this growth mindset as a tool in their little educational backpack to fall back on when it does get tough, because it is a total different shift from athletics or anything else, where it's just natural if you're not so good at basketball right away.
Right. We just accept that for some reason. And yet, for me, like I mentioned, my sister, I think of her as being the creative one, like, and that I can't draw. I'm not creative. I can't do those things. But Rhonda is just naturally good at it. And she always has been. And that's something she's good at. And yet there's that reality. If I practice my drawing, I would get better at drawing. I'm probably never going to be, a famous painter by any means. And if you ever saw some of my drawings, you would also agree. But I could get better at the skills of drawing, even if I'm not going to be an amazing drawer. I could get better at doing math, even if I'm not. Math may never be easy for me. So how do you get over that, like that reality? Like because I think one thing that I would worry about in telling kids about a growth mindset is how do you keep them focused on the growth part of it, even though some of them may not ever get super great at something? How do you help them focus and see that they've gotten better and that that's really awesome?
Well, in my class, and I'll just speak to what I do, we talk a lot about right away, it's okay if you can do it and somebody else can't, because their brain is not ready for that right now. It will be, but it's not right now, and that's okay. It's just a culture of like family and togetherness that you have to build in your classroom, but also individually. One of my favorite things to do is sit down and assess kids one-on-one to see what they know, and they absolutely love doing that, maybe because I love doing it so much, but then they can see it. We graph it out. Oh wow, like when I started school, I knew 2 numbers. Now I can count to 150, and they can see it and they can graph it and see the change. Goals like that have been really powerful, and as long as you hit that that tone in your classroom right away, that it's okay to be on a different page, and that's good, and it brings diversity to our classroom. It's really never been an issue. I think it's all about how you start right off the bat with them.
Yeah, I think, Courtney, this is LaCosta. I think you just have such a unique opportunity reaching those pre-K students right out of the gate. If you look at some of the research Carol Dweck has done out of Stanford on growth mindset, she has and her team have given a free website called Mindset Works. And on Mindset Works, they literally have tutorials for primary age students where it shows them the brain with dumbbells, and that all of our brains are, you're exactly right, they grow at different rates. And the more you work it out, the better it's going to grow, or the faster it's going to grow, and the more you're going to retain. And honestly, in these tutorials, even with primary kids, it talks about the connection of neural pathways in the brain and how we have to do that. And if we don't make those connections, there are no roads to keep your information. And they get it. And they're excited about it when you start talking about this science. And we don't talk over their heads. We talk where they're at the right level. And, depending on where you're introducing this, that wonderful website I referred to, Mindset Works, they have it tiered. So here's what it looks like as an elementary lesson. Here's what it looks like as a middle school lesson. Here's what it looks like as a high school lesson, and going deeper for each one. But yeah, setting those very tangible goals so they can see and feel the growth. And the goals are independent of each other. Ultimately, we're trying to get the kids to the same place at the end of the year. But in our reality that we're dealt with in the classroom every day, that could be 25 different places.
So true. I think like those big words you talked about, going deeper with them and talking about the science with them, that is one of their favorite things. And we talk about like your prefrontal cortex, that's what helps you make smart choices. They love those words, neurons, and how they connect and make pathways. That's like something new and exciting for them to just embrace a little bit how their brain is doing all those amazing things for them.
Yeah.
I love the picture. So I'm showing folks a little bit of the Mindset Works. LaCosta shared that as one of the resources. So that's in this growth mindset resource packet. The little table of contents will link down to any of those resources. Carol Dweck, I posted her little talk, her TED Talk. She talks about the power of not yet. And that it's not that you can't do something, it's just you're not there yet. Can either of you talk about how you talk to students about the power of not yet?
That phrase is probably one of the most said phrases in my classroom. I say it, the kids say it, they embrace it. If they hear somebody say, well, I can't do that, their instant reaction is, you can't do that yet. We have little cards with growth mindset sayings. We say them every day in the morning. And one of them is, I can't do it yet, but with effort I can. And we talk about those words. It's okay to not do something yet, but effort, which means you actually have to try and you have to put work in and you have to practice at something. Then you can build yourself up a little bit and get a little bit better. But that word yet is probably their favorite word. It's so, maybe it's different for younger kids, but it's such a hopeful thing for them. Just something to look forward to. I can't read yet, but with effort I can. They can fill in that blank all day long.
Do you find a little bit of that effort too, like what you know about their brain development? And I love that you talk to kids about this. Your brain, your body might not be ready for this yet, because we certainly know that about reading, that there's that reading window. My sister has talked about watching her children learn to read, and she said it's really amazing because they struggle and they struggle and they struggle, and you can tell they so desperately want to do it. And she said there's literally, she said, when they turn 6, she said sometimes to the day for her children, it's like the veil comes off and their brain is ready to do it, and then it's just easy from there. And that power of not yet, that you're not there yet, but you can be. And maybe your brain isn't ready yet, maybe your muscles aren't quite big enough yet, but if you keep trying and working on it, and you have the tenacity to keep doing and to do it over a long period of time,
Yes.
You'll get better.
I think it can be the most powerful word in your classroom for sure.
Throughout this packet, I have just a few other little videos to talk about growth mindset. One of my favorite videos to help explain growth mindset for kids, and many of you have maybe seen this Rube Goldberg.
I'm Audrey Clements, and I made a Rube Goldberg machine.
So this young man makes his Rube Goldberg machine, and part of what he does is he makes a prediction of how many times does he think it's going to take him to have this project be successful. But part of it is he acknowledges right away that it's probably not going to be successful, the first time out. So he makes this prediction chart of how many times he thinks it's going to take for this to work. And then he keeps making modifications. He tests his theory. He plans and he retries. And he predicts that it's going to take him like 30 tries to make this whole machine work. And it ends up taking him 4. Because each time he tried it, he reflected on the problem. He went, oh, I didn't have X, Y, and Z set up correctly. And so he revised and he did it again. And then he tried it again. And then something else wouldn't work. And so then he would go back and review those prototypes. And one of my favorites in the video, I encourage everyone to watch it, this Audrey's Monster Trap. His success when he accomplishes that goal is like the pure joy of learning. So I'm wondering too, from both of you, do you have recommendations for teachers? Like, how do we help students reflect on their learning so they can identify some of the things that are causing them to get stuck so that maybe they can get unstuck? And or how do you help kids celebrate those accomplishments?
So I think, can I speak on it just for a second?
Yeah.
Before going, this is LaCosta, before going to the accomplishment side of it, it's really, really important to celebrate mistakes. There's a great educator in Iowa that's posted stuff out there on TeacherTube, and she talks about my favorite no, which essentially is her favorite mistake. And she showcases it. And what it is it turns into a huge learning opportunity for every other student in the classroom. It's really an anticipated failure, and she showcases it so other kids don't get hung up on the same thing. But as far as the reflection piece goes, I think it has to be intentionally built into your teaching time, right? Into teaching and learning. And you talk about it, and you model that behavior as an educator for your students in the classroom, and let them know when I failed and what came of it and how I felt when I succeeded. And so that they feel that it's okay to talk about my errors, and here's what I learned from that error. And you have to practice it. It's not natural. You know, Courtney, you are, like I said again, it is just so amazing that you got these little people and you're able to start with them. It's much more, I want to say they're more malleable than if you start with high school students and try to start putting this growth mindset idea on their plate, if you will. Then you really, really need to model this idea of error and success and what it looks like.
I can't count in the 10 years that I've been teaching. I have lost count of the number of kids who will come into my English classroom and just say, I'm not good at English. And that's one of the first things that they say to me. I'm not good at English. And that's really hard. And I think you're right, that by the time they've come to me in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, they've decided that they're not good at English. They're not going to be good at English. They don't like English. And they anticipate a year of torture, basically. Yeah. How do you help model that? Well, you already shared a little bit, Courtney, that you help when you do make mistakes, you model. Do you have any systems in your classroom where you help students reflect? I love LaCosta's reframing of my question, that it's not so much reflecting on like that success, but how do you help them reflect and celebrate their mistakes?
Yeah. Well, like LaCosta said, it all goes back to what you do. They have to see you do it to know how to do that. And after that, it's really a natural thing. It's not anything that I really teach them, but if they can see me, like during a writing lesson, make a mistake on the board. And we talk a lot about like experts in our classroom. So if you're still working on something and you don't quite have your numbers yet, there are experts, your friends in the classroom, who can help you get there. They can help you along that path. And so my little experts can help me when I make a mistake, which helps them practice helping other people. You know, it's not a punitive thing like, oh, you just can't, you don't know how to do this. They don't get upset. It's I see you made a mistake. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I can help you get back there. So it kind of, I don't know, it goes both ways. I model it, but then they kind of take it on themselves. And maybe that's easier with little ones who are sweet little hearts and have kind little souls. But as you get older, that's one of the most beautiful things about the school that I'm working at, Northern Cass, is a growth mindset is the culture in the school. It starts with me and they get it the rest of the way up. And that's going to be one of the most powerful things that they leave this school with, I'm confident in.
And Courtney has generously shared, like LaCosta, they've both shared a lot of really amazing resources. So again, we're not talking about a ton of resources in this. We looked at that website also briefly. If you go on slide 7 in the resource packet, Courtney has linked, she has the activity that they do. I have a PDF version here, and she has the specific growth mindset activity that she does every week. Can you just talk to us a little bit, like, what does this in general look like in your classroom? What is your system?
So it started in our school as Mindset Monday, we call it, and teachers have taken it and just run with it. Everybody has embraced this truly. So with our little ones, pre-K and K, we ran into the problem of like, they're not going to know what this is. They're never going to have heard growth mindset or fixed mindset or neurons or prefrontal cortex before. We need to really like build a strong foundation. So every Monday I intentionally build in time. And if that means we take a little bit of time out of something else, then that's okay, because this growth mindset is equally as important. It sets the foundation for the rest of their learning, and that's just got to be okay. So we take time. The weeks look a little bit different. Sometimes there's videos, sometimes there's poems. There's always some kind of a discussion. We make a poster that we add to all year of the things that we can't do yet. And my go-to is, I can't whistle yet. And they're all blown away. I can't whistle yet, Mrs. Nelson? No, I can't, but I'm practicing. Maybe someday I will be able to get there. I can make noises, but I just can't whistle yet. So we make posters. We talk about the growth mindset ABCs, and these are all resources that I've found, and we've just put them all together. We have affirmations that we say every day, and that's posted on my board. So I introduce it to them on a Monday, and then by Thursday, they've got it down. They know that affirmation, and it's not just something they say, they truly embrace it. They know their brain is like a muscle, and your brain gets stronger when you embrace those challenges. It's been so incredible. So the guide, the lesson plans have just been a way to keep everybody, I teach pre-K, and then there's 3 kindergarten teachers. So it keeps us kind of on track. We do it with fidelity. So all these kids are getting it. And it's been so cool.
What a gift to the teachers who get those kids, in first grade and in second grade.
Right.
Remind me to ask you about this. I want to point out for teachers, yes, Courtney is a pre-K teacher, but if you look at this PDF, I'm looking at week 1, what is a growth mindset? And then she has her supply list, and then the group activity. Some of your, as she said, some of your resources, some of the things you do or use might be different. It might look different in a high school classroom or a middle school classroom. But if you scroll through the topics that they have identified and the main group activity or some of like the main growth mindset sayings, these transcend pre-K. This is not a pre-K curriculum. Some of the resources might be tailored to pre-K students and K students, but the framework she has laid out here is really something that I feel like I, as a high school teacher, could go, oh, sure, that's a great topic. I can do a journal write about this with my high school students.
Yes.
A Flipgrid conversation about this. We could talk about our characters in literature and how they have a growth mindset or not.
Yes.
But the topics that she has laid out, I think, are just stellar. And so please check out that resource sheet, even if you're not a pre-K teacher. And then LaCosta also shared some growth mindset starter kit, and that's also in the resource packet. It's on the same page as Courtney's lesson plans. And within her packet, she mentioned this once, the mindset assessment profile tool. Can you talk a little bit more about that, LaCosta, and how you use that with teachers and students?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just one tool, and I believe the one you've got shown is from Mindset Works. And this is a paper pencil one, so you get and you immediately score it and kind of reflect where you're at on that continuum, knowing that it's a moving number, if you will. But there are also ones that are designed for different age levels. So in the PowerPoint I'd given you, and I'm not sure if you put that in there or not, but you honestly can just Google it and you'll come up with a myriad of examples of surveys, and you can take them online. So it's an immediate turnaround and you don't have to go through this self-scoring process, which can be a little bit convoluted. But students can then see, oh, here's where I'm at. Well, then you can take the same survey again in 12 weeks. Oh, here's where I'm at. So they can actually see themselves grow on that continuum as well. So it's seems very powerful when I do it with teachers. I've done it with a couple hundred teachers now in the last 2 years. And when they take that survey, they sit back and we immediately take about 2 minutes to just reflect quietly on where their score is at. And I let them know there is no wrong zone. It's just where you're at that place and time.
And that to me is one of the most powerful things that both of you have talked about. The fact that this growth mindset is going to be different for different areas of your life and for different subjects, right? And so this kid playing basketball, he already has a growth mindset when it comes to his basketball, but he has a very fixed mindset when it came to reading. And so I love that both of you are talking about that and helping kids and teachers understand that where you're at right now in terms of fixed to growth mindset is also malleable. That will change depending on your situation, depending on how much you work on having a growth mindset, right? On like how much you do that work to do that. I did share the articles that LaCosta shared in your PowerPoint. I just added them into this other resource. What is your favorite takeaway? The question I was going to ask Courtney, sorry. Have you heard anything from the teachers who teach the higher grades? Has there been a shift at Northern Cass? Are you hearing things from teachers about the students' openness to new ideas and new experiences as they transition into the upper grades?
Right. Well, I mean, of course, it depends on the student. But like I said, a total mind shift for our entire school. We, as a staff, when we gathered yesterday and today, talk about the importance of ourselves having a growth mindset, to be able to learn again, to be okay with not knowing something. So really, it's been a smooth transition, so much that there hasn't been very many breaks in there. So you're not really, the more we get into it, the more we'll see how it's impacting the kids. But right straight in the classroom, it's been one of the greatest things we've ever done, especially to have an intentional focus. I mean, we take 25 minutes to half an hour on a Monday, and we go through that lesson together. I do it, kindergarten does it, first grade does something similar, second, third, fourth, all the way to fifth grade.
That's great.
So it's been really cool.
LaCosta, do you have any tips for teachers on how they could get started? Like, where is this a good starting point for teacher? A teacher is like, all right, I want to try this. I'm going to embrace my growth mindset about growth mindsets. What are some of your tips for launching this in a classroom?
Can I answer this in 2 parts?
Yes.
I mean, Courtney mentioned it, that it's so important. I mean, it's imperative for the teacher to have a growth mindset themselves. You can't teach somebody to have one if you don't embrace the idea yourself. So looking at, and you put up a couple of those articles by Jo Boaler. So Jo Boaler is also out of Stanford, and she has done a great deal of research from her team at ucubed.com. And you can go there for resources. And what's nice is she's taken these huge studies that they have done on growth mindset and the impact it has, and she has narrowed them down into a 2 to 3 page paper that is really, really easy to digest and comprehend, just real quick reads. And quite honestly, she's got 9 of them up right on her homepage when you go there, and you can click on them and they pop up. Like I said, 2 to 3 pages tops. And if after reading those 9 briefs, if you're not convinced, you will be. I mean, it will be. There's just so much evidence out there to support that this is a game changer for kids. So I think starting with yourself, right? We have to reflect on ourselves and making sure we truly believe this before we start toting this to our students. But one of the easiest, quickest things is setting those classroom norms. And like Courtney said, the not yet. And those are norms. This is just what we do. This is how we do business, and starting it on day 1. And then revisiting it over and over and over again. And Courtney has a beautiful design for 25 to 30 minutes weekly. If you don't have that, 10 minutes, or break it up and do tiny little chunks each and every day or every other day.
Yeah. There are just so many things. This is one of those, I've loved my opportunity this year to get to talk to other people like both of you, but these are the moments where I'm just itching to go back in time and to give this gift, the gift of this language, to more of my students. And to do it, I think there was some of that. I think we as teachers, because we want kids to succeed, I think to some extent we do this a bit naturally, right? We encourage them. We, like, when they get frustrated, we're like, give it another shot and you can do this. But I never had that strategic language, those words that the two of you are talking about, and that framework for just helping students see this picture. I would encourage, but I hadn't set up that expectation or that explanation that here is why I am pushing you. Here's why I am being your cheerleader, because I truly believe that if you work hard, you will get better. And so I wish that I could go back in time, and I can't. And so all I can do is continue having conversations like this and hope that more kids get exposed to these ideas. Because you're right, this article by Joe Bowler, it's amazing the difference that the fixed growth mindset had on the 7th grade students that were in this study. This is not a touchy-feely thing, growth mindset. This is backed by a ridiculous amount of sound data. This is the way our brains work. And so the more we can help kids understand that and see that, that's amazing. And I love, Courtney, that you as a school district, and LaCosta just said this too, that you're continuing to talk to teachers about having that growth mindset, that sometimes it's easy to continue doing things, kind of fall into those patterns, and feel like, well, I'm not good at that. Like, that's not what I'm not good at teaching grammar. I would say this is kind of where I felt, I'm not good at teaching grammar, so I'm just not going to teach grammar. That's not a very good strategy for me or for my students. But I will say one thing that I did for my students, I am not a good speller, and I use a lot of tools in when I'm writing things to help me spell things correctly. But at the beginning of the school year, I would tell my juniors and seniors, I'm not a great speller. So when I write things on the board, I likely will spell things incorrectly. So you're going to give me feedback. And that is part of our job as a classroom. You're going to give me feedback. And I loved, Courtney, what you said, like, we all have different strengths and skills. I'm going to continue working on my spelling skills. But some of you are really good at this. And so you can help support me and tell me when I've made a mistake nicely, so that I can learn that, and so that I can fix and I can learn from that experience.
I love that. I've always been a firm believer in not hiding that from your students. Don't let them know when you make a mistake. Celebrate that with them, but then tell them what to do with that. That becomes such a powerful skill, that they can work with those mistakes and they can work with other people who make mistakes and help propel their learning too.
I think you both touched on that idea of feedback, and the feedback that we give our students ourselves as educators, and the feedback they give us, and the feedback they give each other, and knowing and practicing how to do that properly, right? It needs to be very specific feedback, not, oh boy, Courtney, you're so smart.
Right.
Because what do I do with that? I don't know how to replicate smart. It's, no, Courtney, I really like how you've organized your words on this paper. Okay, now you like my organization. I can repeat that. So that goes right along with the growth mindset idea, is the very specific feedback to help the kids actually grow.
Yes.
That's a great point, because all too frequently we do just say, that was great. This was awesome. And like those, and yes, to some extent, like, sometimes there's a little bit of that, of like, oh, like, that was very funny, and that's okay. But how does that was great help a kid understand what they did well, or help other kids get better at doing that? And Courtney, you talked about this too, the power of having that classroom community, that because we are giving feedback, and LaCosta, that's a great reminder to us, we need to be giving specific supportive feedback, not just general comments. And that will be hard to get kids to do if they don't trust each other. and they don't see the classroom as a safe space.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that you help build that safe space and just help make it, how do you make it comfortable to fail and to make mistakes?
I think honestly, it all goes back to what you are doing, what I'm doing in front of them as a teacher. If that's in a small group setting or a whole group setting or one-on-one, if you're doing an assessment, they've got to see you. They need to see you fail. They need to see you succeed and celebrate successes and failures. They have to see it all. They have to see you embracing it in order for them to embrace it. I don't think I could say that enough. Like, you truly have to own what you are trying to get into their little brains.
I like that. We need to own it so that they can truly see it and own it. Any last, if you could tell a teacher like why they should give this growth mindset language a shot, do you have any parting encouragement for teachers who might be thinking about trying this and like why they should tackle this, in addition to all of the myriad other things that they have to get ready here because it's August? Why should they bring growth mindset work into their classroom?
I'll just say one thing, like, kids are hungry for it. They love it. They like to dig deeper and learn about that kind of stuff, how their brain works, what it's doing for them during the day. That was probably one of the most exciting things, just hearing about the neurons and how they make connections in your brain. And they can throw out those big words and use them and understand them. It's kind of a little bit scary, but once you own it and set that foundation in your classroom, it will be one of the most beautiful things, one of the most beautiful tools you can give for them as they go forward.
So in the last 2 weeks, I've been doing back to school workshops literally all over the state of North Dakota. And the number one piece of feedback I get, or the question I get, is how do I get my students to persevere? Whenever challenge is put in front of them, they give up and they just don't even want to try. And they put their pencils down and say, I can't do it. And why not try this, right? Because this is really how we get them past that I give up or I quit attitude, and we get them to start persevering, because now they really understand that, okay, if I do put forth the effort, things will change, things will get easier. And so it really kind of turns into the why not? Why not try it?
That's a great, yeah, why not? What have you got to lose? Like, kids are giving up, and you know, it cannot hurt. You all talking about this reminded me of this little video. It's 20 seconds. And so I'm going to share this video. This is a friend of mine's grandson. He's 18 months old, and he is trying to use this much too big shovel for him to fill this hole. And at some point he realizes, I have a different way of doing this. And he just picks the dirt up with his hands and he throws it in the hole. And so as the two of you have been talking, that was sitting in the back of my head again, of sometimes kids get so caught up in using or doing it one specific way that you reminded me of this, LaCosta, of like, they just give up. So it would have been really easy for this kid who's trying to use this shovel that is as tall as he is. He's not getting any dirt in. And it would be really easy for him to just give up. But I think we have naturally like this growth mindset and this perseverance, because he realizes that the shovel isn't working, but man, I can do this with my hands. I can do this a different way. I don't have to use this big shovel that I can't even hold. So let me figure out a different way of doing the same thing that works with my skills and allows me to continue to grow in doing this activity. So maybe that's a little cheesy, or maybe it's just me because I think that this is a really cute little video. But to me, that really shows that perseverance and that growth mindset of, yeah, let's try different ways of doing this. And eventually we're going to figure it out, but we're going to figure it out together And we're going to remember that while we might not be able to figure it out yet, but we will be able to figure it out.
I like what you said, that that's like natural. It's inside of you. He didn't know those words. He didn't know that he had a growth mindset or that he couldn't do it yet. He just figured it out. And I think kids sometimes just need a little extra nurturing, a little extra, just a little bit extra to get them there, to get that growth mindset out of them. And then they can fully embrace it and run with it.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up there because I think that that was just beautiful. LaCosta's reminder about perseverance and give it a shot, because we've got to nurture these kids, as Courtney just said. So feel free. I believe both of these lovely ladies are willing to take any questions. And so their contact information is there in the resource packet, along with a lot of other great resources. So if you want a few more tips and strategies, check out a couple of these websites, particularly the Mindset Works website that LaCosta mentioned. I've thrown in some videos that you could potentially use with your students that help explain growth mindset to kids. And certainly if you really want to dive in and get a deeper look at growth mindset and learn a bit more, there are a couple book resources as well. So take a look at some of the growth mindset resources. And one of the things that I'm trying to embrace this year in my, not yet, anything that I try, even if it's not perfect yet, is still going to help these kids. It's still a step in that right direction. And so why not take that first step day one as we launch a brand new school year? So I can't thank the two of you enough for coming, particularly LaCosta, who's stranded somewhere in a building by herself, but is making this work for us. So thanks everybody for joining today, and we will see you next time on the Teacher Weekly Chat.